Welcome back to the Student Design Showcase YouTube channel. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at what exactly product design is and different skill sets you should be developing if you're a product designer. We're then going to have a really brief look at the design process and what it's all about. So we thought a really fun way of starting this episode would be to ask you guys on our Instagram what you think product design is. And we got some really great responses, and we're going to just share a few of them with you right now. So some of them were all about making life simpler, fixing a problem, solving problems and innovating new ideas, a process of innovation or improvement that results in a product fulfilling a brief, the simplification of a creative idea for the benefit of the user, making a change in such a manner that the product becomes a part of habit, making a product to solve the particular problem or to make it more easy to use. So all of these answers are actually really great, and me and Oliver agree with all of them, and that leads to the fundamental idea that there is no real definition of what product design is, but it's rather a mixture of two main things which have shone through in what you guys have said. The first main thing is all about solving a problem. So a product designer's chief responsibility is to be a problem solver. Is to answer the brief or answer the problem space which you've identified in the market and come through with a creative, innovative, proper working solution to address this. And that's where the second key part comes in, which is all about making it user-centered, and you're designing it with the end goal of the user being able to actually function with it correctly. So once you've done all of this development, and as you're going through the process of development, it's important to get real users to test it along the way, to analyse them at the beginning and sort of research into them, so you can create a real human-centred solution to whatever it is the problem that you're coming up with. So in brief, we believe that product design is problem solving with a user in mind. So to be a good product designer, there are a few fundamental skills which we think are really important to have along the way. So the first one is your ability to actually be able to emphasise other people. How well can you see the world through another person's shoes and actually look at something from their angle? Because this is such a crucial part of design, being able to actually emphasise with the final customers who are going to be buying or using your product. How well can you see the problem from their perspective in order to actually address it in a way that is going to be good for them? So that leads nicely into the second skill, which is actually problem solving. Are you good at taking a problem and coming up with a good viable solution at the end of it? Can you actually go about your sort of day-to-day job taking lots of problems which are going to be very, very hard to answer and not get frustrated by this, but actually enjoy tackling this problem and coming up with good solutions at the end? The next one is actually being able to listen. You need to be able to listen to what it is your target audience is wanting and make sure that you get all of the information that's around you, listening out for key bits of information, listening out to what it is your client wants from you, and actually being able to therefore define what it is which you are doing. So how good are you as well at being creative? Are you able to come up with lots of solutions for ideas, but also analyse them as to reasons why they're particularly good and reasons why they're particularly bad? It's very important as designers that we don't just take the very first idea we come up with and stick with it and just see it all the way through to the end. We need to be able to fully analyse every idea we come up with to actually see the reasons why that's a good idea and that's a bad idea, to help us improve in the future and give the best deliverables for that particular project. And the final thing is not being afraid to fail. We actually learn a lot more from failing than we do succeeding, and this is even more true when it comes to the design process. Failing ensures we know what ideas need to be improved upon and what needs to be iterated to make sure we come up with a final idea that's really, really good. You're never going to get absolutely everything right when you're designing. However, being able to acknowledge this failure and move forward with it is a really great way to prove to yourself that you're going to be a great designer. Now that we've gone through all of these skills, I know a lot of people are going to be saying to us, but you haven't mentioned things like CAD, you haven't mentioned things like being able to sketch really well. So those hard skills are of course important, but they're very subjective to what field you're going into. So they might not be particularly relevant to every single genre of product design. However, those skills which we've just highlighted above, they are going to be the fundamental ones, which no matter what area of design you go into, you're going to have to be able to do. So we're not saying don't go off and improve your CAD work. Of course, go and improve your CAD work, but make sure that fundamentally designers are problem solvers. You're actually getting that part through in your skill sets. And when you're applying for jobs as well, you're actually putting that part in your CV and you're showing that through your portfolio, that these core fundamental skills you can actually do. So now's a really great time to just pause the video and ask if you guys could press the subscribe button down below so you stay up to date with everything we're posting and just help support us as a page. It really does help us if you could press that button. If while you're there you press the little bell, it'll give you an actual notification every time we do decide to post a video so that you guys don't miss out on anything. Thank you so much. So what actually is the design process? So the design process is kind of a roadmap to help designers answer and tackle briefs, ensuring they're keeping the user at the centre of it and not missing out any important parts. There are loads of different types of design processes which people have come up with. One of the most common ones which you'll come across is the double diamond, which is by the Design Council. They really push and advise people to use that one, and it basically uses a mixture of divergent, so broad thinking, before then bringing it back in together in a convergence fashion. But generally speaking, a lot of the design processes, they follow the same sort of structure, and we'll go through that structure quickly now. So the first thing you go through is sort of a research phase. So in this research phase, you're going to broaden out your thinking and start researching around the problem, or around the area I should say, in which you have discovered or the brief has led you down. So the first step you might go through with this is assigning to things like competitor analysis, is seeing what's already out there on the market and then seeing what's sort of lacking from that or what's really good about that, and analysing where you can sort of come in. But it's really crucial at this stage that you stick with the user-centered theme we've been talking about throughout. So this user-centered element could be things like going out and talking to people who would actually use the product at the end of it. So you can do things like surveys to gain a large volume of quantitative data in a short amount of time. However, the problem with surveys can be that you have to make sure you're actually asking the right questions. So a good way to make sure that people aren't just answering the way they think they should be answering rather than the way they actually do things is by doing contextual inquiries. So this could be watching people going about their normal lives in a natural, not tampered with way, so that you can actually empathise with your users properly, as if you're going through that day with them and seeing how they interact with products similar to the one you're thinking about producing. And then when you analyse this data, you then cluster similar categories together. This could be referred to as affinity mapping, which is a term which some of you may have come across. So this gives an indication to where people's thinking is most centralised, and this can also create personas around this for users. The next part of this then is about defining the actual problem. So now that you've researched and done all your user looking, looked into the market, where actually are the problems within the brief which you've set yourself? A great way of doing this would then be to set yourself a problem statement, so you know specifically the problem you're trying to tackle, and then setting yourself some key performance indicators, or KPIs. Other people may call these constraints, but they're basically the same thing. It's basically going about and setting yourself a list of things which your product must have in the final stages, so you're looking into the future at this point, and it's basically a conclusion of your research. So you're saying, my research has told me X, Y, and Z, so you write out your list and say the product must do this because of X, it must have this because of Y, and it might need to do this because of Z. You're basically just giving yourself that list, so later on you can check back and make sure that you're hitting all of those points with any ideas you have. So moving on from this then, you go into an ideation phase. This is when it broadens back out again. So you're going to think of 1,000,001 ideas about different ways you could tackle the solution, and you're going to go absolutely crazy at this point. This is probably the most fun bit which all designers enjoy doing, just come up with loads and loads of ideas, and then you're basically going to just see how far you can take this before then bringing it back down. So at that point you might bring your KPIs in and say, well actually, idea number 1 doesn't really answer the brief very well. However, you might like a certain part of it which you can then take across into idea 2 to help develop it further. So this ideation phase is really vital for the creative ecosystem you're creating, because it's going to make sure that you're coming up with sort of new and innovative ideas. You can then start developing and testing certain ideas you have. A great way of doing this is through prototyping. So you could prototype up certain ideas, give it to your audience, like your users, the user base, which are actually going to finally take this on and make sure that they actually interact with it the way you want them to. But you shouldn't force them or be telling them how to interact with it at this point. You should just naturally let them use it, and you can take points then on how you can improve the product and develop it further. This use of testing is then basically going to go through to the delivery stage, where you're going to create a final glossy product or whatever, do all your rendering, which you have to do for it to make it look pretty, do all of your final manufacturing checklists, how it's actually going to be made, before you give it back to the person who's actually giving you the brief. One of the key things to remember about the design process, and this counts for any process you read, is that it really isn't a linear process you're following. There's going to be lots of times you're jumping back and forth between stages. You're going to be ideating and realise you need to sort of further look at research at a previous point, and you're going to jump back to that research to make sure that you have that to back it up. And this is completely normal. Don't feel like just because we're saying you go from research to ideation to development, it has to stick in with that one. In later episodes, we will talk about the design process in a lot more detail. This is just a quick introduction to it. But definitely don't be scared if you're looping all over the place back and forth. This is definitely completely normal. And it's actually a good thing that you're doing, because it's making sure that you truly are understanding the problem space you're in. So as you start better understanding this design process, your whole way of tackling problems is going to be completely changed. And this is sometimes coined as thinking like a designer, or design thinking. And this is actually a skill which a lot of businesses look to have, or product design agencies, because it's what's going to set you apart as actually a really, really great designer. We're going to go more into this next week, when we're going to have an episode all around this design thinking and what it is, different ways you can improve it. But we hope that this first episode has really given you a flavour of what product design actually is, and the reasons why applying the design process can actually be really useful. Thank you guys so much for watching that episode. If you liked what you saw and would like to be part of the Showcase family, please make sure you subscribe by pressing the little logo. There will also be more videos for you to watch, so make sure you go check them out. If you'd like to see a lot of the design work and also more of the social media presence we do, please make sure you follow our Instagram, the link is just below, as well as our Patreon, so you can get exclusive benefits and help support us on our amazing journey.